The average taker of the SAT doesn't really have a method to where they practice for the SAT, or like a method to actually take the SAT. They take the reading section, they read it as a full read on the first time around, answer all the questions in order, and don't get the score that they want to. And on top of not having a proper strategy to actually take the test, they don't bother improving the strategy they already have. They don't bother practicing it and getting good at their own strategy that they've just not even created, just followed based off of how the test is, and wonder why they don't improve. Now, a 1600 score has a strategy that works best for them, that they've tested and that they've practiced thousands of times. They've practiced the strategy that they've made so many times that they've become so fast using their own strategy. Now, the two levels of this is the level of practice and the level that it took to create their own strategy. And that's why they got the score that they got. But it wasn't always like that. When they first started, they used the typical strategy and didn't get the score they want. So the only difference was the level of effort they were willing to put in. So on my first ever SAT that I took, I remember like actively taking the SAT. This is a very vivid memory from the reading section. There was a passage that was particularly hard. I read like the first 4 or 5 sentences of the first paragraph and instantly knew that, it was one of those old English passages, the history ones about like, and which had like two different types, like one from one perspective and one from the other. Like imagine just like you're reading this passage and you don't really understand it, right? So what's like the logical thing to do? Probably do the other easier passages, right? But for all of my SAT preparation, I had actually practiced everything in order. So this was like a choice that I had to make. Like, I didn't practice this, so I was really nervous about skipping this and going to another passage and then coming back because I didn't know how I'd manage my time. And on top of that, I just like was so nervous about the whole thing because I knew that passage was so difficult and I'd never encountered something that hard. So I had two dilemmas there. Like one, like the passage itself was difficult, right? That's a given. But like, do I switch or do I don't switch? And I ended up switching. I ended up doing the easier passage first and coming back to the hard passage. And I ended up doing like moderately well on that passage, not as good as I anticipated, or anticipated going in, but not as bad as I thought I would have done after taking the exam, right? And so my main thing there was that I didn't really know if I should switch or not. I'd never really encountered that. I hadn't built a good strategy. I was doing the SAT like it was meant to be done, and that's the wrong thing to do. So was it the right thing to do? Ultimately, yeah, but I just wish I had practiced that skill beforehand. This is how to save time on SAT reading. All right. So like before I talked about my like strategy that was very basic, and I actually modified that after I took that exam, and I created a method that was good for myself. Now I'm going to teach you like my method and what you should do to get good at a method that you create or how you can create your own. All right. So no matter like what way you decide to read, whether you skim first, whether you read the passage full, what order you answer the questions in, your speed is correlated with how much you have practiced using that method, right? So if you're slow on the SAT and like reading section right now, no like new strategy, no matter what anybody tells you, is going to like dramatically increase your speed, right? But there are better strategies than others. And I'm going to talk about the strategy that I personally think is the best and works for me well, right? But basically a new strategy isn't going to help you get faster, right? Just like if pretend you're like running a mile, right? You're trying to reduce your mile time. Now you can perfect your running technique. You can get better at running, like, and like know like your foot placement or how high you should lift your leg between every like step that you take to run, right? But like that's not going to make you so much faster, right? It might shave off a decent amount of time and make you better, but that's not going to instantly like make you faster, right? That's not, it's the practice. It's doing that new method every single day for so many days. That's what really gets you an increase in your speed, right? So how to decide if you want to keep or change your strategy, right? So ultimately it's very personal to you. Your strategy is just basically how you operate, and nobody can tell you if you should keep or change your strategy. There's only certain things that you can ask yourself to figure out if it's good for you, right? So you can use mine, or like what I highly recommend actually is use portions of mine that you think are good and leave portions that you don't think are beneficial to you. And just while you're practicing, you'll know what ways are better for you if you just do it again and again. If you have a sheer big volume of practice, then you don't need to worry about finding a strategy. A strategy will just show up as the way that you do the exam that is better for you, right? So obviously there are better and worse ways, but it's about how comfortable you are with the method, right? So basically you want to decide to keep or change your strategy based on if you feel if it's working for you or if it's not working for you, right? If it's working for you, you're going to feel that like the passage goes relatively well. You're able to like have enough time to understand everything. You're not rushed for time, but also that you're able to fully understand like what you are supposed to be doing at that current moment. You know, it's very defined like, okay, if I don't know this, I skip, or if I do know this, I do this particular thing, right? So if you have all that set, I'd actually recommend you keep your strategy if you feel like it's working for you. If you don't feel like it's working for you, change it. Implement some other things that you've seen and things that you know work from other people, right? Don't repeat my mistake of, you know, think not having a method at all and just like doing the passage how you're supposed to, and then, you know, having this nervous, stressed out moment when you encounter something hard on the real SAT and you're forced to change your strategy. You know, like keep this in mind. Don't repeat my mistake. Okay. So how I actually read optimally, this is my strategy, I guess. So first do like a full read, right? And I don't mean like a full read as your like typical like deep reading as your first read. Like you want to figure out like the plot, like summary basically. Like, you know, like in middle school when you're doing your like thematics of a story, right? You have the like introduction, the setup, like the start of the like the start of the climax, the resolution, right? You want to figure out those main points, right? And you want to know where they are. Like what is it trying to tell you? Where are like what's the introduction about, like roughly like the main idea and where that part is, right? Where is like the main source of information? You don't really care about knowing what it is, but you just care about knowing main ideas and where that information is, right? And it's a little more effort than skimming, right? I don't actually like the term skimming because it's just like I feel like it's you if you actually were to skim the passage for something, like it would be useless, right? Skimming is only good for finding the location of information, but if you do a full read, you know everything and the main idea, which is what you should focus on for the reading SAT, right? So and also it's less than a detailed read. It's less than like a complete detailed read of like every single word and like you like read the passage like you're reading a book. You shouldn't do that in my opinion. Now, reread the portions that you have questions on specifically, right? So if there's questions about evidence, if there's questions about a specific part, like, oh, the author says this, or where does it imply that the author believes this, right? That's where you want to look deep into the passage and you want to actually like heavily analyze that, right? You want to heavily analyze the portions that they guide you to, because that's where you need to deeply think about the passage, not when you're reading the whole thing. Okay, so my question answering order, right? So take down like again, this is like a very personal thing. This is not something that you do normally. This is something like this isn't something you just follow the order of follow somebody else's order. I'm going to tell you mine, and if that fits with yours, that's good. But take your easiest questions first and then do your hardest ones, right? So mine is like I do definitions and then I do evidence questions and then I do like questions that are paired up with evidence. So like double questions where there's evidence on the second one. And then I just do everything else that's on there. And then I do main idea last because I've had such a good like flow of the passage. I know about the passage. Answering the questions has helped me understand the passage even better. And that's where I figure out the main idea from there. So don't use this order that I've given you because this is just what I find easiest, right? Do what you find easiest first. And if this is applicable to you, you know, use it. But if it's not, you know, don't do that. But how do you actually figure out if questions are easy or hard, right? So basically you're going to figure out how the questions are difficult based on the way that you operate on the SAT, right? And that might sound complicated, but let me explain. You're going to figure out what questions are hard just based on your accuracy of taking practice exams and literally how you feel, right? Your actual operation on the exam, right? How do you feel during certain questions? Do you feel certain questions are harder? And what does your accuracy tell you? Like, what is your like streak of getting those questions right or wrong? And you need to organize them into types of questions, right? So like there might be evidence pairs, there might be like command of evidence questions, there might be like categorize them and figure out which ones you're like incorrect at, right? And that's how you get faster at those types of questions, you prioritize the ones that are easiest first, because all the points are weighed the same. Harder and easier questions are weighed the same. So bang out all the hard ones or all the easy ones and then leave the hard ones to the end. Okay. So finally, like in terms of speed, everything that I told you is going to be useless if you don't like practice the method, right? Like based on like the mile strategy. Right now, all I've given you is the technique, the running technique, right? This is what this video is supposed to tell you, but the running technique isn't good enough. It's the practicing running every single day that makes you faster, right? That's exactly you have to treat the SAT by. Don't treat the method, like don't treat this like just as a way as you use the method and you instantly get faster and then that's it. You get good at the method that you pick by doing it again and again and again, right? Do it in full practice tests. Practice it like it's the real exam. You know, there's this formula I have at the bottom, and it's the technique that you like plus a lot of experience with it, and that's what gets you high speed. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you learned something today.